Unified Standard is a unique puzzle to solve. You and 2 of your friends bring 3 total standard decks, but between all of them, you can't have more than 4 copies of any card other than a basic land. How do you split your cards? What cards go in which decks? It's a challenge, but an exciting one.
There are some format-defining, powerful cards that you need to decide, all right, I need to split these between 2 decks. Maybe that doesn't work, and you end up having to instead, play decks that don't overlap as much. So that's kind of the skill behind building Unified Constructed.
Let's take a moment to go back and look at last year. So there's a big challenge in splitting cards up. For example, Thragtusk, one of the most powerful cards in the format, a 4 of in many decks. But in Unified Standard, it can only really go into 1 deck for 4 copies. Similarly, utility spells have the same difficulty. Which deck gets your Searing Spears? Which deck gets your Arbor Elves? These are the tough choices you have to make in Unified Standard. Now, most teams were really conscientious to not have anything step on each other's cards. It's very important, for example, that they didn't want their green-red decks and a Jund deck next to each other. Those don't really coordinate very well. But with France, for example, the winners of the tournament, they had a mono-green deck and a Jund deck, a red-green-black deck, on the same team. They really only had to split up a few cards, Thragtusk, Arbor Elf, but otherwise they were able to coexist, leaving a blue-white control deck, which is neither green, red, nor black, to live on the same team with them. Another great example is Belgium. They had a red-green deck and a black-green deck. Now, it might seem like that overlap is problematic because of the 2 green bases of those decks, but because one was a more aggressive deck and one was a more mid-range deck, they were able to take the best pieces of black and the best pieces of red and combine it with the green shells to create 2 decks that didn't really eat up cards from each other that much, while paving way for a great blue-red-white deck to be the 3rd deck in their arsenal.
So Khans of Tarkir is a wedge set. That means that some of the most powerful cards in the set are 3 colors. So they force you to play those specific 3 colors in order to play the card. Like Siege Rhino is an example of this. So there are a lot of standard decks right now that are just basically the wedges from Khans. You have Abzan midrange, Temur aggro, there's also Sultai, which is Sidisi whip, Mardu planeswalkers, and there are many ways to build Jeskai as well. So in Unified Standard, it can be very tempting to just split up all the colors. That makes your mana really easy. You can put the strongest cards in each of those colors in the deck of that color. So in this format, you might play green-black, which could be like a graveyard deck or a Constellation enchantment-themed deck with Doomwake Giant. You could play blue-white as your second deck, and that could allow you to play blue-white heroic. And then for your final deck, you can play just red aggro. And that allows you to play Goblin Rabblemaster, Sarkhan the Dragon Speaker, Lightning Strike. These are very format-defining cards, and this way you know that your mana is not being split. It's very simple to build. But because the cards in Khans of Tarkir don't necessarily go in the same decks, you don't have to use that path. You can try to play Abzan midrange, and you can maybe play Mardu planeswalkers along with that. So even though these are both playing black and white, they're not going to be playing the same cards, and they might not play 4 of each anyway. You can put 2 Utter End in your Abzan deck and 2 Utter End in the Mardu planeswalker deck. And then the same is true for Sorin, Solemn Visitor. For your 3rd deck, you might want to play Jeskai aggro, but that might not be possible because a lot of your powerful red cards are going to be in the Mardu deck. So you might instead want to just go with blue-white heroic. And that way, you know, your lightning strikes are not split up, these powerful cards are not split up, and you can play all the Rabble Masters in one deck.
2 years ago, in the Magic Online Community Cup, I had the chance to build 8 Unified Constructed decks for Unified Ravnica, a crazy format. Unified Standard's a little bit different. You only need 3 decks, but it's still a blast. The puzzles to solve are endless. Do you want to put your Jeskai deck and your Abzan deck together? Well, if you do that, then what's your 3rd deck? Is it a monocolor deck? Could there be a Devotion deck somewhere? What's the secret thing no one else is doing that you could pick up on? It's a challenge that's fun and exciting and like nothing else in all of Magic. Go give it a try.